Death Note is an interesting story due to its placement in Shonen Jump, and what was being built up and demanded of it during its conception. In an era of up-and-coming battle shonen, Death Note had the unique task of creating a battle shonen not centered on physical fighting, in which in my opinion both the author Tsugumi Ohba and artist Takeshi Obata did an excellent job, appealing to pretty much every battle shonen fan out there, with the only actual fighting really being sort of comedic in nature in a rare instance here and there. However, its nature of being an alternate style fighting manga in Shonen Jump left it with a familiar formula, a scaling formula. Yes, it was, and I'm not even joking, created to have rankings and scalings of characters, but with intelligence rather than, say, a power level, to the point they made entire guidebooks and multiple interviews explaining these intelligence stats and rankings and levels of almost every single character in great detail. And then having the characters in the story go so 2000s edgelord mode that they would power scale their own IQ in monologues. Everyone wants to know, who was smarter, L or Light? But there are many other questions within the story too, and even outside of it. In fact, a lot of characters are surprisingly smarter than I even thought. Other questions like, how do Mello and Near compare to each other? Are Mello and Near smarter than characters like Beyond Birthday? Is Misa really a pocket genius? How did Light's dad, Soichiro, figure out stuff that L and Light put together couldn't? Are they being smarter than Light and L in the story? I think the answers to all of this are a lot more interesting than you might think, and we might have some good and pretty objective answers for pretty much all of it, even more than I originally thought. So as a big fan, I really did enjoy really going through all of these sidecasts, so sit back and let me teach you some as usual. While it's impossible to really rank the intelligence of every character objectively, hell, how to even rank intelligence in general to begin with might be a grand philosophical question people to this day can't actually fully answer, there are objective rankings within the Death Note universe that allow us to create a foundation to then build upon, and also in narrative rankings that help us then create a further layer to then fill in the gaps with the more subjective things later, which I think you'll find agreeable. While I won't go into as much detail as I did in, say, L versus Light, who is smarter, since this video will include dozens of characters rather than just a 1v1, I will do my best to present the important things. The Death Note How to Read guidebook is very interesting, as one definitely worked on closely with Ohba and Obata, comprising many unique interviews, perspectives, and much more, even offering stats and hidden answers not blatantly talked about in the story, such as L saying Light Yagami being his friend was a straight-up lie, and that he actually hates him, or how whenever he said a percentage, he always meant over 90%. There are the stats as I mentioned, but these are actually mistranslated and don't give us as much insight as you might think they do, and don't actually talk about just the raw intelligence ranking as a more popular English or Spanish translation would suggest, with the intelligence stats just meaning overall knowledge, rather than IQ as an example that Viz just slapped on, as IQ probably sounded much cooler. It actually usually says overall knowledge, and that can just mean too many things, with the basic definition of knowledge just meaning facts, information, and skills acquired by a person through experience or education, or the theoretical or practical understanding of a subject. As an example, Takeda has an overall knowledge rating of 7, but she is called stupid by Near and the others, with Mello also having the same rating on overall knowledge. Near also has a higher overall knowledge rating than L, but it's clear the story presents L as superior to Near overall. While it's clear that the more educated and intelligent characters tend to have a higher OK level, it's clearly not the deciding factor of intelligence in Death Note. However, one set of stats actually does just straight up rank the intelligence objectively of characters and has no chance of being mistranslated, and that is the Shinigami data pages, which is separate from the human bubble type graph system shown at the start of the book. While we won't be using the data book as the criteria for the humans, the Shinigami will be due to it being an objective assignment. Shinigami, as described also within, have brains with an intelligence ranking like humans. Some Shinigami are very stupid, some are average, and some are hyper intelligent. They don't seem to possess eldritch and beyond reality type intelligence for the most part, and are compared to humans outright in mental function. The intelligence levels go 1 through 10, therefore I think we should have the human cast be 1 through 10 later. for simplicity's sake, especially considering some characters can be directly compared to Shinigami, and we can just put those Shinigami directly on that tier without much explanation further. The next phase is to find out how these humans are in that pecking order, easier for some than others. We'll go over the full Shinigami ranking at the end of the video, but for now, it's easy to say Light and L are above level 7, which is REMS for an example. We could also just flat out say that Light and L can also be their own criteria as being above the rest of the main human cast. A 1v1 between Light and L is the main story of Death Note, with everyone else sort of being their chess pieces. In the Death Note anime analysis guide on page 51, it reiterates this fact that it's obvious that Light and L are the best of the best, and earlier in the book, it actually says L is known as the greatest detective in the world, and one of its greatest minds, if not the greatest mind, that Light is compared to in pretty much every piece of material ever. Light is stated to then be on a similar level to him. Whether you think one is slightly smarter or whatever is not relevant in this type of video. They'd probably be in the same tier. So with that exhausting bit of groundwork out of the way, let's get into the main cast. At the bottom is Sido, the Shinigami, who is level 2. So we then just immediately get into level 3, since there aren't really any level 1 cast members. The only level 1 in the series is basically a feral Shinigami named Kindara. So we'll go over all those rankings once again at the end. So to really start off, in level 3, I'd say there are 2 real candidates. Those would be Sachiko Yagami, Light's mother, and Sayu Yagami, Light's sister. And Sachiko is only described as an average housewife, but it's implied she may have had some education where she would then meet Soichiro through her normal life growing up. Sayu is noted as relying on Light a lot when she is younger in junior high, such as when she asked math questions, but How to Read clarifies by college she is independent and much more managed. How to Read basically has Sayu and Sachiko's stats as equal, but Sayu is slightly more creative if you care about them. This further leads me to believe Sachiko has an education. Since tiers are a bit bigger, the slight difference between Sayu and her mother won't just bump Sayu up to level 4. This will be a standard going forward, but normally speaking, I'd say college students are probably smarter than random lazy talking gambler Shinigamis, such as Goku and Daredevil in the data books, that basically do nothing all day. But Shinigami are probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years old. Normally, I'd grant them a level higher than normal if it weren't for Sido being at level 2 instead of a level 1, meaning most characters probably should be smarter than Sido in the story. Should be noted as well, Sayu is considered basically impossible to beat Kira by even her own father and the rest of the world, meaning she probably doesn't show any real, insane, intelligent faculties that would make them suspicious. In level 4, this is where things become much more complicated, as there isn't actually a Shinigami counterpart to compare them to. The level 4s, in my honest opinion, would start off and include the likes of Yotsuba's Ariyoshi Hattori, Aichi Takahashi, and Kyosuke Higuchi. Higuchi is noted as particularly dumb by most people, with the 3 of these all being products of nepotism to get into the big business roles they have today. They all, however, are successful businessmen outside of this and went to very good schools, probably better than Sayu, with much more accolades on top of that. Takahashi in particular is noted for being somewhat stupid to make Higuchi look better in comparison. Takahashi, while noted as stupid, should also be noted as being very, very proficient and having high business acumen. This is where ranking intelligence gets pretty difficult. If this was only about business and accurate decisions with business, Takahashi would be more intelligent than if he were in a "who should we murder with the magical notebook" meeting out of nowhere. However, everyone determined he was stupid before this, and he seems to not put much thought into anything he says in these social gatherings, as noted by others in the databook. Hattori is also quite stupid. However, he has no actual redeemable stats, like Takahashi, and is an even larger nepotism baby, if you would believe it, being pretty much brain dead every single meeting, not coming up with anything of substance, and usually just being written with ellipses, as well as having low emotional strength, which Ohba correlates with the type of lacking mental strength, and is a relevant feature I'll go into more detail at the end. Hattori figures out some cues during the meeting, such as he should be acting like he's chatting in case he's being watched by others or questioned strangely, while Takahashi is the only one who can't deduce why Kira would kill for Yotsuba in their group. All in all, they are all considered stupid by the author and most of the cast, and are pretty much expendable despite their education. Level 4 would also include the likes of Ukita, Demigawa, Cal Snyder, and the Sea Kira. C. Kira may actually be a level 3 character in all honesty, but giving them the benefit of the doubt, C. Kira is potentially slightly more intelligent due to Minoru Tanaka's statement in the Death Note bonus chapter that intelligent people try to change the world, which C. Kira seems to do. But C. Kira only does this probably out of fandom for Kira's actions, and every young person in school would talk about old people eugenics apparently at the time, which seemed to influence C. Kira rather than it being something they came up with out of their own conclusions. They get disregarded by Near and talked down to and go so insane, they write their own name down. At least even Hattori just wanted out of the Yotsuba meetings and didn't go that far, even if it was a stupid thing to just tell Kira, I'm done with you. Midora, who is a level 5, actually is really shocked at C. Kira just freaking out and then dying like that, implying C. Kira is probably below Midora, who seems to manipulate C. Kira for swarms of food, whereas Ryuk, who was eating food, was because Light would actually manipulate Ryuk with them instead of the other way around. Demigawa is a successful and opportunistic host on television, and is actually pretty socially aware. However, he makes stupid, foolish decisions in the face of someone like, obviously, Light Yagami and his grand Kira plans. He's considered foolish in how to read, but he does make the biggest dent on TV from the whole situation, and does it very well, controlling entire mobs of people. And YouTubers honestly wish they would have Demigawa's pull, let's be honest, but Demigawa also works very well in tandem with police, and takes orders and advice pretty well for the most part, until the whole Kira's Kingdom charade, which is something Light still wanted to use to his advantage, and came out to be a good idea for Kira, despite how it was handled. Ukita next is noted as an average detective in how to read, and while he could have eventually leveled up like the rest of the cast as the series went on, he died very early without showing us much. His willingness to act is a good trait, but he was also too impulsive and it got him killed, which was somewhat even less thought out of than a usual Matsuda maneuver. I'll go over him pretty soon. Impulsivity is considered a stupid or foolish trait in Death Note in terms of intelligence, which is why people then consider Takahashi, Hattori, and even Higuchi stupid in Yotsuba. This also isn't to say Sayu and Sachiko are stupid by our real-life standards, just by Death Note standards, which is a series which features super geniuses and the smartest on the planet. So yes, average people would be considered dumb. I'd say realistically, only a level 2 like Sido would really be considered slow by our standards, but you guys get the idea. Cal Snyder is level 4 and is sort of mostly off-screen. The databook suggests he has overall knowledge similar to Higuchi and these very educated Yotsuba nepotism babies, and the other Yotsuba members. It seems to be a more educated man that was bullied and then extorted into Rod Ross's gang due to his low emotional and mental fortitude. Imagine Heisenberg if he just listened to everything everyone told him and had no outside plans, and probably not nearly as creative. Probably being one of the ones that helped Rod Ross from many of his schemes that helped him avoid the FBI and police all around the globe behind the scenes. However, he is considered just a low-ranking goon, and is clearly just Ross's and Mello's pawn for the most part, and in fact, this is actually against his will as he doesn't like them. I think he should be considered more of an intelligent pawn just due to his build type in a gang that probably uses physical violence quite often, in my personal opinion. I'd say the level 4 order, or pecking order, would be C. Kira, just due to lack of showings, Hattori, and then Takahashi, just because of his business proficiency being so high, Cal Snyder, and then Higuchi or Demigawa. Higuchi is more collected and calculated, while Demigawa has a lot of charisma and more social, verbal intelligence, and then Ukita, just based on how the other MPAs kind of stack up later. Matsuda is a good intro level 5 character who could either be high into level 4 or low into 5. He's a main character, so this is where I'll start going into more detail on exactly why, and establish some level 5 standards. Matsuda at the start of the series was definitely by far the dumbest MPA agent on the Kira case, and the least experienced below Ukita. However, like any young person getting started in their career, he grows more adept as time goes on. He especially explodes in ability by the time the Yotsuba group get involved, and learns many lessons and insights that has him going back and forth with the more veteran cast members. How to Read calls him an average young detective rather than a stupid one, similar to Ukita. However, Matsuda actually possesses a hidden ability that says in dire situations he can be quick and witty. This is shown when he breaks into Yotsuba and then convinces all of them he is genuinely a manager and not spying on all of them, despite them all being quite intelligent on the top tier, said the level 4 ones obviously. Matsuda possesses talent, and this is shown a lot by him having correct intuition that he just doesn't know how to use. For example, he will oftentimes actually suggest L's plans right before he does them, and even gets called wrong by the others, only for L to just then do exactly what Matsuda suggests afterward, such as revealing themselves and confronting Kira face to face, and going directly into Yotsuba. While he does it obviously in a very stupid way compared to L, the smartest on the planet, his compass is pointed in the same direction as honestly a superhuman level intellect, which I think is pretty notable. He goes back and forth with people and veterans like Aizawa, Ide, and the others quite a lot, and actually seems to argue with them somewhat successfully, with him only really being consistently corrected by L and Light, and sometimes Soichiro, who are obviously the top of the force. Post-series, when he was incredibly desperate to keep Light in a high place in his heart, he theorized ideas that convinced much of the fan base, and possibly even the author, that Near may have cheated or been up to no good in regards to the final Light encounter, with Ohba even suggesting it may be true due to what Light told Mikami to do. However, I'll go over that later and explain why it's probably wrong. Matsuda's best feats even include the like of tricking Mello and shocking Light in Part 2 when he jams his name into Light's computer and tells Mello that the current L is lip service and incompetent, which actually convinces Mello that that's true, etc., etc. I think that you guys get it. Matsuda is clearly not stupid by real life or even the databook standards, just L standards. I'm going to be honest, how many of you guys would be able to break into Yotsuba like that and then convince them of those things? He also is pretty emotionally and socially intelligent, acting with Light as a college student, picking up on many romantic cues and tactics Light uses, etc., with a lot of his anti-feats in this regard being similar to Light's father, where he is mainly in denial about Light being even potentially Kira. Even after Light's death, it seemed like he really liked him, despite being the guy who actually shoots at him at the end. And he's also noted as helping to make progress with cases with his big decisions, even if they're suboptimal compared to L's original ones. Ide would also be here. He's considered reliable by Aizawa, even before he potentially grows on the Kira case, and goes back and forth with the rest pretty confidently and consistently despite having literally zero information on anything like the others. Him and Matsuda eventually seem to actually get along, and Matsuda reads him pretty well. There isn't much to say other than that. He is just clearly in the same league as the others in MPA, albeit he's on the lower end, and should be above Ukita. He isn't called dumb or slow like Matsuda ever, and makes pretty rational decisions such as forming the police to be secretly L supporters, even if they back down to Kira publicly for safety and stability's sake. Next is Takeda, which may surprise some people, but Takeda is considered intelligent by the standards of most characters in the show, and the databook actually says she considers herself intelligent, which is pretty interesting. Being highly successful in school and in adulthood, and generally considered smarter by Light as a partner. However, Near considers her a stupid woman, with Light thinking she is easy to manipulate, and Near thinking she is pretty stupid and just exposes herself for her ego to her detriment most of the time. The databook implies she has more general knowledge than the lesser Yotsuba, and being chosen by Mikami for being educated and intelligent. Being stated to be intelligent by Mikami is pretty good, because Mikami is very impressive, which I'll get into later. She could be level 6, however I don't think she has better showings than Aizawa or Misa, who, spoilers, will be in this tier. To be really honest, Near and quite honestly Light himself seems to disagree with Mikami's assessment of her, despite Light being on her team, with Takeda then resorting to beefing with a drunken Misa and foolishly getting stuck in her own ego to Light's disappointment. You could also say that Mikami saying she's intelligent is kind of like someone calling someone they have a crush on intelligent, or someone intelligent just because of their political beliefs, or something like that. And then saying they're intelligent because they just agree on basic world matters. Aizawa and Mogi both are considered the top of the MPA other than Soichiro himself, with Aizawa leading the police force when he temporarily resigned from L and becoming police chief post-series. He's the only character who catches on to Light pretty blatantly in the MPA other than the top tiers, and catches Light and Takeda passing notes, with Near complimenting him before telling him to stand aside. He and the rest of the MPA is called incompetent directly by the databook, when it says the task force is just entirely incompetent. He's stated to have good qualities and how to read, and a very impressive detective in the analysis guide, albeit no match for L and Light, which is a similar statement actually given to Commander Rester has with Near as well. We'll go into that later. Aizawa also deduces that if Ryuk is lying, like L suggests, then Light's confinement was actually useless, and he also explains to Matsuda that Light killing Lindell Taylor shows he could be caught, which is something that Soichiro didn't even pick up on. Near also recruits the help of Aizawa and the others under Aizawa's command with a later case, but it could just be a bit of nostalgia and bias talking, or convenience. Mogi is generally considered impressive by every single thing that mentions him. I'm not even joking, almost anything talking about him calls him the impressive man. Near calls him impressive when he and Mello combined can't interrogate him. He always keeps his composure and mission on mind no matter what. Impressive in the guidebooks, he's even talented at being a manager and an actor, despite it being completely out of character, can cook extremely well and do pretty much everything. He's even implied to be athletic and other details, and he is an all-around just impressive guy, and even follows Aizawa's lead and plays into Light being Kira, honestly better than Aizawa does. He also is very good at working with the top tiers and handles massive amounts of information for L and Light very quickly during Yotsuba, which actually impresses Light as well. Once again, the impressive man. You could argue he could be level 6 in all reality, but he doesn't actually do anything that I'd consider that impressive, ironically, to warrant that level like those actually in 6, which I'll get into. If you guys disagree though, I wouldn't fight anyone on any of those, including Aizawa or Takada. Finally is Misa. Misa is a strange character because, like Mello, she's one of those characters who has maxed out levels of intelligent initiative and a way of using their intelligence that baffles everyone around them, while they constantly catch everyone off guard, gain advantages, and so on, while everyone looks down on them for some reason. Misa's initiative surpasses even L's, and this initiative is what allows her to actually defeat Light in their first encounter in Aoyama. She has much more, such as manipulating Higuchi into revealing himself as Kira and recording him on her phone while being unable to kill anybody. She manipulates the task force despite being pretty much objectively the second Kira. She manipulates Rem into doing what she wants despite Rem knowing firsthand the fate of Jealous and Misa's intentions of possibly wanting to kill her. She even manipulates Light over and over again despite what people may think. While initially Light never planned on falling for Misa, her charms and wits actually start to tempt him. She also gets torture interrogated by L and never spills the beans at all, and it is a far more intense feat than what Mogi did against Mello and Near, which Near already called very impressive. Mello learns that Misa did this later and it impresses him. Her only anti-feats are Light calling her stupid alongside L, but she tends to play dumber than she is, and it's a part of her skill set as not only an actress, but one of Light's assets to be considered dumb. It should be noted, Light or L calling you dumb also doesn't really make you dumb most of the time. Light even calls Naomi Misora dumb, and she is pretty objectively a type of super genius, which I'll go over later. One of her only real shortcomings tends to be her overall education and knowledge, while her other mental statistics are actually extremely high. I'd say level 5 would be ordered like this, with Matsuda and Ide at the bottom, then Takada, then Mogi, then Aizawa, and then Misa. I'd have Misa above Aizawa for the sheer reason that I can't think of anything Aizawa has done even comparable to her. I'd actually maybe argue Misa might even be a 6. Mogi also just gets a bit outclassed, even just directly with the interrogation. Misa is overall pretty smart, but just lacking fundamentals to actually show her intelligence. I'll start level 6 off with a character that will probably get me in hot water, but that is Male Jeevis, or Matt. Matt's claim to fame is that he is a rank 3 at Whammy's house behind Mello and Near, and while he is an intelligent kid from the orphanage, he gets careless in critical situations. The opposite of Matsuda basically, leading to his death. It is implied that students from Whammy's house can absorb a bunch of information, said for Mello, and this is due to brain capacity and ability. However, we learn in alternate material that there are other students who simply left the orphanage, died, or graduated, so even that is hard to tell if Matt was a full-on top tier if we had everyone there. And when watching many monitors, it's hard to tell how aware of them Matt actually is. You could honestly put Matt as 7 as well, just based on that if you were charitable, but he really does nothing realistically, and even has mediocre stats considering what he should be. He even gets called an idiot by a random Takada goon after he tries waffling on them, and Light fools him basically no diff. He's a character who is kind of smarter in theory than on screen. Roger Ruvi is Watari's successor for Near, and is generally smart enough to raise the next generation of L's and handle their upbringing or education. Since he is tasked with basically trying to raise superhumans, he has to be at least somewhat decent, but his stats and overall lack of any feats generally puts that into question like Matt. He could also just be following training and curriculum given to him by smart people like L and Watari, rather than coming up with the curriculum himself, which is already kind of heavily implied. Mido, Takeshi Oi, Shimura, Kira, and Namikawa are basically the 5 smart guys, that Higuchi pulls around him to do the thinking for him. They are all pretty intelligent and highly educated, and generally go back and forth on numerous issues in debate and discussion. Namikawa in particular is not only someone who stands out to L and Light as someone who could make it to the top on his own and cannot be Kira, but is also professional strength at chess, graduated Harvard, and even gets a gotcha on Light by getting him to admit Higuchi is Kira, and generally has impressive stats to boot. Although L says Namikawa getting a gotcha on Light was actually Light's slip-up, rather than Namikawa being impressive, but he is probably the most conventionally intelligent. But once again, those five all debate and go back and forth, with Shimura noting Mito couldn't be Kira because he's too smart, and Namikawa getting corrected by the others as an example on why they should keep the accidental killing powers of the Death Note a secret, as an off-the-dome thought. Shimura is also notable, being the only one who isn't a product of nepotism and reaching the top, as well as deducing that Coil could just be working with L and they're trying to set them up, which everyone denies until Namikawa actually learns the truth. Then he acknowledges that Shimura is actually pretty sharp. He's just unconfident, probably due to his upbringing. Rod Ross is one of those characters that if the scale was judging a different type of merit, he'd be a top tier. In terms of his criminal skills, he is maxed out, a big fish in the United States that even the police can do nothing about, who perfectly routes himself around the rules to do whatever he wants. And normally something like this would easily be a level 7, however based on his stats and the way his gang operates, Rod Ross doesn't seem to be some type of Penguin or Joker type super criminal. It seems that Rod Ross's criminal skills come more in handy with the exploitation of others, being able to accurately gauge and utilize the talent, smarts, and skills of others, and properly organize them into an efficient, unstoppable gang that wasn't even on Kira's radar. He's open-minded, even using Mello's advice and trusting it without letting his ego get involved. And a good example of what I'm talking about is the way he's using Mello just as much as Mello is using him realistically. He's sort of like if Higuchi was actually smart and actually earned his place in the world. An anti-feat of his would be the careless usage of the Death Note when he gets it, which clearly marks himself and his location as a crime syndicate that wielded it, making him more careless in this regard than the Yotsuba group. But this may have been Mello's intentions. Ray Pember is an unfortunate character as his only feats are against Light Yagami in a 1v1 situation, while unknowingly also facing his Death God surveillance team. Ray is an FBI agent that has been doing it for quite some years, even before the BB murder cases, and the FBI has to be very decently trained, especially in Death Note, far above normal police. And Death Note FBI agents have to be able to hack into technology and have the capability of shadowing Light Yagami without him even noticing until Ryuk actually finds out. Ray has no notable showings outside of this, but his relationship with Naomi and his stats implies he's at least somewhat intelligent, with a solid or even an average FBI agent probably realistically should be. FBI has higher requirements than, say, MPA should, and requires international work as well as much academic background. Ryuk is stated to be objectively level 6, so not much to be said. I'll give a more in-depth answer to what I think he is later if you ignore this, as I sort of kind of disagree with it. But level 6 characters are actually surprisingly high up here, as you may have gathered. He does some intelligent things when he isn't playing dumb, such as memorizing the exact angle and location of all of the 60+ micro cameras in Light's room, and explains them in perfect detail while arguably tweaking out in physical distress. Light's father is constantly considered a competent veteran that can even help Light and L. It can even be considered that he is nerfed during most of his investigation, as he doesn't want to believe Light is Kira at any cost, getting so stressed he has a literal heart attack about it. But he's able to not only find things that Light and L couldn't when he's not nerfed, such as during the Yotsuba meeting's weekend killings data, but could even trick Light and Misa with his acting performances and much more, despite both Misa and Light being extremely top-tier actors and intelligent. Maybe that's where Light actually got it from. He is generally considered smarter than the rest of the MPAs and can follow along with L's plans pretty well, such as being the only one to realize L was testing them at the beginning, doing what Yukuta wanted to do with the second Kira Sakura TV incident, but better. His only shortcomings come from his own moral code and integrity, as well as the stress of not wanting to accept Light as Kira, or even suspicious for that matter. However, both he and Ryuk seem to notice that he actually does suspect Light deep in his heart, as he never even considers Sayu even remotely a suspect, but he can't say the same about Light. Mito, Takeshi, and Kita would be the low bar I think here, with Shimura being slightly smarter because of his deductions about Coil, and initiative in trying to stop Yotsuba Kira. Roger needs to be able to raise child geniuses and detectives and understand them fully, which I couldn't really see Mito, Takeshi, or Kita, or Shimura even really doing, but something that a strong FBI agent veteran like Pember and honestly Namikawa should realistically be able to do. It's probably harder to be a criminal-proof mafia crime boss like Rod Ross that has to probably skirt guys like Ray Pember on a bi-weekly basis and even ghost Kira than a pro chess player that got into good schools due to his upbringing, just to be realistic. Matt and Ryuk both have insane levels of memory downloading, like with Matt probably being smarter than Roger. Soichiro was able to find cracks in data that Light and L couldn't, as well as being very competent despite being probably nerfed the entire story. He inspires Light for a reason. Rem is objectively level 7 by the databook, but she also has a few other feats that support this. She's intelligent enough to have a sort of intelligence aura or strength reading of characters. She's able to sense this strength from Light and L during her talks, and this is a quality Light also has when sensing Near. Near can sense it through Minoru's actions and so forth. Usually, intelligent characters have this type of ability in the series or more, and she's able to maneuver a bit around L's interrogation and is pretty accurate in her uncoached replies in Light's opinion, despite her not just standing there silently like Mogi, but makes slight inaccuracies Light wouldn't make. Light also thinks she's smarter and easier to work with and explain things to than Ryuk, but I disagree. Iber and Weddy both should be level 7 and very similar, just with extremely different talents. Iber is basically Misa's manipulative characteristics, maxed out, and with far more knowledge, experience, resources, and creativity. He has a social intelligence as high as Light and Misa's, as well as basically doing what Light's acting does on the Kira case, but as his job. Manipulating Yotsuba out of millions of dollars despite it not even being L's plan, and convincing them all he's a high-level detective and so on. Weddy too is a high-level burglar that can hack into and figure out how to break into almost anything, even L and Watari's most advanced security setups. Watari is actually a world-level inventor, even better at making things than L, and makes more advanced security systems than his superhuman prodigy, yet Weddy breaks in no difficulty. In How to Read, Weddy is directly stated as being able to break through technological systems on a level that actually surpasses that of L. Once again, L being a superhuman who operates from technology. You'll also notice that compared to the SPK, that Rester struggles to get close to Takeda, and Giovanni says he probably couldn't get into Mikami's place undetected. These are both things that Iber and Weddy's expertise probably could have cleared easily. We learn in alternate material that unless there's highly specific circumstances, like a lot of money, victims, or interest, L won't even go after you, yet he went after Iber and Weddy, who Light and Kira had no idea about, which speaks to their talent and how much they actually interested him, as well as him trusting them face to face and then guaranteeing their competency. The SPK trio, Giovanni, Hal Lindner, and Anthony Rester, are the modern top FBI agents selected to take down Kira, with Rester being the leader. Giovanni and Rester are both capable of avoiding Mello's onslaught due to aliases and preparation, while Lindner survives due to Mello's plans for her. Even with this, Lindner is one of the few characters the databook actually calls intelligent without a question. Without Giovanni, the Kira case would have been impossible to have solved, and Rester being described as extremely impressive and competent as a detective, even picking up on L's trail in Japan when Near ordered him to. Near trusts Rester completely and he asks his advice constantly, with Lindner actually devising her own plan to get Near and Mello to work together discreetly, even though Mello doesn't actually want to work with him. And it's because of Lindner that Light is actually defeated, and Lindner has almost as much social intelligence as Light, Misa, and Iber on top of this, rivaling Mello's, who could manipulate the Ross mob with similar knowledge levels. They're all very solid and intelligent characters who far surpass the likes of Pember and outdo the MPA completely in stats and statements, and honestly what they should be, with Lindner and Giovanni being especially impressive due to their combined L-like initiative and almost light levels of social prowess. Realistically, I'd place Ryuk as a high level 7 character. I generally believe, like Iber, that Ryuk is more of a manipulator in terms of his intelligence type. The story actually implies that Light is his victim multiple times, and Ryuk can almost always follow along with Light's plans and can tell what he's up to. In a way, he represents the evil Kira within Light, and he enjoys watching Light not just because Light is smart, but because he can understand everything happening like a drama unraveling before him. Ryuk is the only character in the series that Light utterly concedes that he can't manipulate, despite Light probably being a manipulator on the tier of Iber, and in a weird way you could argue Ryuk actually manipulates him and coerces him to keep going further and further, implying he may kill him or get disappointed in him if it gets too boring, being almost a demonic depiction of Light's own twisted ego that it controls him and eventually actually kills him, which is shown more in the anime ending. Even later seems to dupe other Shinigami and potentially even the Shinigami King. I'd say Rem is the lowest due to lack of main feats and lore, but Rem was able to skirt around L quite well in interrogation without just staying quiet like Mogi, and can see through Light and L's psyche slightly. Ibra and Weddy should be better than Rester, with Weddy having better abilities than Giovanni and Ibra being a far better infiltrator and communicator than Rester, which is Rester's main talent. However, Rester is also highly intelligent to the point the databook actually mentions it, albeit inferior to Near. He's also someone who climbed high into the FBI and gained the trust of the government. Lindner is higher than them because her social intelligence is almost on par with Ibra, slightly manipulating Mello, and ending the case while getting into Takada's group, while Giovanni has one of the highest stats in the series, surprisingly, and while he isn't on the level of Weddy when it comes to hacking, he possesses high-level detective and FBI training that she doesn't, realistically. He also is necessary to taking down Kira while she isn't, and unlike Lindner, he is also able to survive the SPK extermination without Mello sparing him, and can trick Mikami with his Sharingan-like copy ability. Ryuk would actually be the top, with him being mildly unimpressed and able to follow pretty much everyone in the series that isn't a level 8 character or higher. He seeks intelligent people out post-series for this specific reason and looks down on people like Masuda and the MPA, and even on Light in the end, saying he actually thought Light might be able to make it out of the Yellow Box warehouse, and that it was a letdown, implying he may have thought of ways Light might be planning to escape, while Light could not really think of anything. Level 8 is where we get into the L successor type levels of characters. You can start this tier off with Kid L himself, and around 8 years old, pretty much stopped World War III by himself, which inspired Watari to try to find and create more like him. Let that be an introduction. Watari is level 8, and if you want to be a data book Andy, he has god tier stats, even eclipsing Mello's in every way, and are only directly surpassed by Light and L. He is a world-class inventor and mind, creating methods that would raise the likes of A, B, Near, Mello, and Matt, and possibly even helping L grow into who he is. He can enhance L's technology, a master marksman, has some of the greatest versatility on the entire planet, to the point L in the novels could never beat him at a game of chess. Albeit those novels are not mainline canon, we don't know much about him outside of them, and they are funny to know. He would have produced something crazier than even Near's Shinigami recognition system, pretty much the equivalent of Death Note's Alfred from Batman, a world-class intellect who could be higher leveled if this story was basing intellect on other faculties. Next is Naomi, who is surprisingly top tier, which for most people that are casual viewers of Death Note may be shocked about because she's very briefly in the show. So I'll explain some lore about her so that you can briefly get a better picture of why L was so excited to actually hear about her. First things first is Naomi was removed from the plot because she figured things out too fast. This stated by the author himself, and she was a threat to the very story to keep existing. In Death Note analysis, she is stated to be the greatest and strongest enemy Light has to face in the beginning, to the point his brain actually almost gives up the intellectual confrontation numerous times to consider going into a violent one, which he would have lost badly, or even cheating with the Shinigami eyes. This means she is a stronger threat than the entire FBI that came after Light, Interpol, and the MPA, and even L at the start of the series. She picks up immediately that Light lives near where Ray was on the bus from a brief encounter, but most of Naomi's lore comes from the BB Murder Cases novel. That isn't directly stated to be canon, but it's referenced and implied to be relevant, and very revered by Ohba in How to Read. To the point they attribute L's fighting style to the fight that happens in the novel itself, when Naomi basically whoops B's and L's asses on 2 separate occasions. I'm not joking, that actually happens. In both the novel and in the manga, Naomi is mentally nerfed and distressed for 2 reasons. In the novel, she is basically being demoted and purposely removed and bullied from the FBI due to being the most competent member in it, due to being a foreigner, posing a threat to the top guys like Rester. And in the manga, Ray is killed, causing her to go on another mental spiral and nerfing her abilities. So everything you see with Naomi in the main series is her after a long retirement, depression, and desperation to work with L again to get back in the saddle. But in the BB novel, we learn that Naomi is strongest when she actually trusts herself after L's coaching for her to take on BB in a unique way. While she doesn't possess the superhuman calculations of Near or L, she possesses a very inspired detective style that allows her to catch B moments before B would have actually beat L. L says only Naomi can actually take on B for him, and that nobody else in the world can even do it after he specifically seeks her out and explains more as time goes on. Even her shortcomings in the beginning of the novel are due to her not actually getting coaching from L yet, nor actually facing anything on that level, but she does eventually then evolve and grow competent. It is implied by BB and L both that Naomi is actually being pitted against him as L's replacement, and Mello implies that BB, a backup of L and super intellect, loses from underestimating her, and that Naomi always possessed what it took to defeat him. Naomi seeing that he was lying multiple times and finding out his intricate clues he would have left behind when forced and told to look for him. Mello implies that Naomi may have actually allowed Elle to live longer than he would have normally. All in all, Light is lucky she was in a low spot in her life and was hoping for Elle to coach her into obtaining a victory again, which is exactly what would have happened as Ohba states. And there's a reason her luck stat is then stated a 1 out of 10. You can place Mikami in level 8 too. While he's mostly featless, he is essentially Light's version of a successor, with Ohba explaining that Mikami was being set up as someone who could think and be on the level of Light so that he could act independently, which is something that Near has with Elle specifically. Mikami also has pretty intense stats and goes much beyond Light's expectations all the time, but he's different from Light and that causes their inevitable failure. Before B, there was actually a successor named A, and A was the most promising first-in-line choice by both Elle and Watari to succeed him. However, due to having low mental stability, he didn't last long and didn't want to actually continue being alive. He would probably be a level 8 at least due to that. Minoru Tanaka is from the newest Death Note one-shot. He was the smartest middle schooler in Japan and was chosen by Ryuk due to his responses and reputation. He's able to deduce that going well in IQ test doesn't make you intelligent, and explains how someone like Light could probably operate even in our modern world, implying it's because he can. In a matter of minutes, as just a middle schooler, he hatches an elaborate plan years in advance that even Near cannot see through, forcing Near to call him extremely intelligent and admitting defeat. I explain more about Minoru in my Minoru video here, and why he wouldn't be that impressive despite what it sounds like on paper, with Near being a little lackadaisical about the encounter compared to his extremely passionate match with Kira, and with Minoru doing less impressive things than Mello realistically. But some might say Minoru is even smarter than Light, and Ohba may agree for the simple reason he saw through Ryuk and didn't give in to using the Death Note, instead making Ryuk his puppet and getting rid of the Death Note and Ryuk at the same time, which Near notes as why he thinks he's so intelligent. Kei is a student from Whammy's house from the novel and movie Elle Changed the World, and in this hypothetical, Elle actually defeats Light, but Light died before he is convicted and Elle gets depressed and felt defeated. The Elle in this timeline is strangely very emotional, actually considers Light his friend, whereas in the main story and timeline, he never did, as explained by the author. He also gets really emotional and even pulls his hair out and freaks out when nobody's around at one point, meaning it's not just an act. And when somebody gets harmed during his case, Elle even concedes to Kei on an airplane and gives her a type of world-ending data against his will. Pretty much like Light versus Mello, Elle has to lock in after Kei has her way a bit, and then pretty much destroys her. For B, a short description won't really do him much justice, but I recommend reading the novel yourself. But he is quite literally a backup and replacement for Elle should Elle ever kick the bucket. While the story is a bit vague on it, it's heavily implied that if Naomi didn't evolve and become independent, B would have beaten Elle in the case, and he only lost because he underestimated her and her ability to grow. Mello also implies he thinks Naomi and honestly himself could handle the situation themselves, albeit Mello has hindsight, and BB's alias Ruruyuzaki is a mockery of Elle, and the alliteration of that may imply he actually knows that Elle's initials are LL for L Lawliet, even nudging he may know Elle's identity, something Mello and Light and Near don't know. Mello uses BB and his crazy do-whatever-it-takes methods as inspiration, which is what causes him to utterly decimate Light and Near at the start of Part 2. Mello also implies he has knowledge on Elle that Near doesn't, and that is the fact that B almost single-handedly actually beat him, and this is something that causes Near and Light, even the audience, to underestimate Mello at the end. BB's actions inspired Elle to then take the name Ryuzaki, and it could be implied this is a detective code he stole from B, like he did Coil, as a type of trophy and a nod. Mello is a character who got the most points on anybody else in Death Note at a high level. He consistently got Light and Near more than anybody else, one-upping and outfoxing them at the same time numerous times while blatantly breaking the law and not remaining anonymous, making Mello the most dangerous person to Light's existence as well as the plot. While his raw mental computing power is nothing like Near, the rest of his intellectual faculties are far superior, with him being highly independent, controlling Ross's gang on his own talents, and creating the Death Note rocket scheme, which made Minoru Shinigami tunnel mission look like child's play in every real way. At the end, Lindner suggests Mello died to save Near and solve the case, but Near doubts it. But I disagree with Near. Not only was the narrative pointing to that, but it's outright stated and implied in the databook and the novel as well. Light explains that Elle would have known there was a fake notebook swap that Near couldn't see, but Mello is that other side of the spectrum that surpasses Elle, that would have saw through Light and deduced that Light was up to something more, which he would then intend to weed out with his actions to confirm his suspicion. While Light says that Mello is no longer a threat due to knowing his name, this is where those two don't know about BB or Mello's past or inspirations, with the databook saying that if Near died at Yellow Box instead of Mello, Mello had a decent chance of actually still winning. This is stated by both Ohba, who actually considered having Mello win, as well as the Death Note analysis guide. The BB murder case is actually narrated by Mello, and it's implied he knows he's about to actually die. And even in the scene he's talking to Lindner, it looks like he's very depressed and that he knows what's about to happen too. In the end, usually when he's getting competitive, he gets angry rather than depressed, and only Mello ever learned what it took to beat L without some crazy death god cheat like Light did, which Mello actually mocks Light for. And he puts it into practice by giving Near the win over Light Yagami, just like L gave them the win over Light, and just like L gave the win to Naomi. I like to imagine that if it was him against Minoru, he wouldn't have just sat in his room pondering Minoru's next move, and would have gotten like hostages or something to force Minoru to actually give him the death note or expose himself somehow. Would have been a fun hypothetical. Near then is self-explanatory. He has stated numerous times to have brain power on the tier of L in multiple sources. He's stated to actually operate on the level of machine and death note analysis and beyond human limitations. This is also implied in how to read. The only issue is that he doesn't seem to know how to move outside that box that he figures out that well, and his brain seems to be reluctant to put him into situations that require him to have action. This is why L was superior in Light's mind, and why Mello could do a lot of things he couldn't, despite not having that superhuman machine computing ability. In terms of ranking, Mikami is overall the most featless, only following Light's orders and ideology well for the most part. Naomi has great feats and statements, as well as great covers for her anti-feats that puts her above Mikami in my honest opinion. Minoru is stated to be extremely intelligent by a person on the level of L in terms of raw IQ, and K puts the moves on L and tricks him a few times when he isn't going full steam and seems to be depressed, just like Minoru does with Near. Watari should be above the likes of K and consistently slams L in many other categories, with Mello and Near clearly being set up as his next possible superior. BB almost beat L in a 2-on-1 and should be similar to L in function as well as personality, trying to copy him to a T, and probably inspired Mello to be the menace he was when he came in. Only problem is that L foresaw that Naomi could handle what he could do, and B didn't. Starting off with level 9 is Near post time skip. Near was already someone who thought on the level of L as a child, so this one is a bit more theoretical, but since Near grows up into an adult, he matures a lot, and his actual brain would develop and mature substantially. And if it was already on the level of L as a teenager, it would surpass it as an adult, meaning he can actually compute things then probably better than L can objectively. He even takes on some of Mello's mannerisms, such as eating sweets, and probably learn from him. However, we only see him against Minoru, who he isn't really that passionate against, whereas against Kira, he actually hated him and wanted to stop him at the cost of his own life in the Battle of Pride, etc. A slightly older Near beat C Kira as well by just telling him they were generic and then leaving, causing them to write their own name in the death note. L and Light would be the definition of level 9. They wouldn't be level 10 as they aren't perfect, due to obviously the plot. L is stated to be the smartest, or one of the smartest in the world, in Death Note analysis, making him smarter than Light when the series actually first starts. But like adult Near and Naomi, Light then grows as he fights L, and the databooks then say during their peaks they are pretty equal. Even if you think L is slightly smarter due to being at an immense disadvantage, as stated in numerous sources, and then preparing the way for Near and Mello to actually take Light down, like he did with Naomi and B, which Light never foresaw, they'd actually be pretty similar. I go over more on L versus Light in a video, so I'll just let that speak for itself. The final in 9 would be Harmonia Justin, which is the Shinigami Realm advisor. You see a few times he's talking to Sido, and he talks to Ryuk in the Minoru chapter. It's just stated to be level 9. If he thinks on a similar level as Light, L, and Near, but has hundreds of thousands to millions of years of knowledge and wisdom that he actually uses, unlike most Shinigami, he may probably just default as their intellectual superior. Level 10 is new, the second most powerful being in Death Note. She has maxed out intelligence to the point she isn't inquisitive about literally anything because she probably can't be. Something L and Light cannot claim, nor would realistically be. Both Light and L both have to have flaws for the sake of the story, she doesn't. And at max level, it's the Shinigami King, who is the smartest being in Death Note, being stated as possibly being an incomprehensibly intelligent, eldritch being to humans, and more powerful than Nu, something nobody else can claim. And some say Ryuk tricked him, but there's an implication by Mello and BB that the Shinigami King may have allowed all of the events to transpire because it was amusing, and he kept a close eye on pretty much everything. When Minoru was going to sell the Death Note, he changed the rules, and this is a good feat for Minoru, so considering even the Shinigami didn't actually see that coming, so maybe Minoru is a level 9 after all. Anyway, big shout out to my friend Call Me Kratos for the back and forth on the series. One of the few guys on the level I could really consult on something like this, and offered some great insight into BK and much of the more of the other characters. As a bonus, if you guys think the stats are really worked on closely by Ohba, which they're implied to be, and should be considered, I'll show you guys that list now compared to my own now at the end. Going purely off of stats, post normal video. Overall knowledge plus creativity plus initiative plus emotional strength added together seem to be the defining power bubble in the series, which is what L and Light have that match each other perfectly. In that case, it would look like this.
Hello everybody, Clyde here. Seth and I worked extremely hard on this video together, as all previous Death Note videos on his channel were actually a combined effort of us two, except for the video on what Light really wanted. With Seth doing the research for the videos, and myself doing the physical editing of said videos. Long-form content like this can sometimes take a few months to produce, so I ask you all to please kindly like the video, subscribe to Seth, and have yourselves a Merry Christmas.